a budget workshop for the City Council to begin look at the 23-24 city budget. And I'll pass it over to our acting city manager, Bill Post, to get us rolling.
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to just give a quick overview summary of the budget in general. Excuse me. I think it's important to note that the budget that we're presenting or starting to review tonight includes what I believe it will take to run the city, provide the services that residents expect, and also what councilors have expressed in your goal workshop that you had back in February. It does include several new positions. Many of these were requested last year as well, and then were subsequently eliminated from the budget proposal. There are several differences in many departments just from a function standpoint for a number of different lines. So we've tried to add lines within the budget for better tracking for us, but also for allowing better transparency of the individual department's budgets. And I'll give you an example of that. One of those lines was, it used to be utilities. And so included in utilities was electric, water, sewer, et cetera. So we've tried to break those out. So you'll see some places where the utilities line may be empty, maybe a complete elimination of that amount, but then you'll see lines within that section of the department's budget that designate water, sewer, electric, and the like. Another example of that is in training lines. There used to be travel, training, and conferences all wrapped up into one line. There are additional lines now added, and those costs are broken out better. We're doing that, again, for better tracking for us, but also better transparency as well. Those are just two examples. There'll be others that you'll see. And if you see those and you have a question about that, just let me know. Overall, I'll say that it's been an interesting budgeting process. We started off already in the hole by about $1.2 million when we started the budget. And that's mostly due to 3 or 4 factors. Number one, in this current year that we're in, we used $558,000 of revenue from the ARPA funds to fund various positions, as well as the capital unassigned fund balance to help us with the current year's budget. So we don't have that money accounted for in this budget. This also fully funds the wage increases in the 2 unions in the police department. That's approximately $450,000 between the increases that were put in play by the council. We're also fulfilling the council's goal of getting to the 75th percentile of the wage and salary study that was conducted previously by the city. If you recall, last year, council went to the 60th percentile with the intent to go to the 75th for this year. That's about $140,000 as well across all the different departments. And then we don't have the IACP study back yet from for the police department, but we've anticipated some of the requested changes in personnel, mostly in the leadership side of it, where they anticipate that they're adding another deputy chief level type position or recommending that. Certainly it's up to the council whether you wish to implement that or not. But we've tried to budget for those recommendations, and that's about $175,000 in the police department as well. So adding those items up, we're around $1.2 million to start off with on top of the current year's budget already. So in a nutshell, again, I've tried to budget for what we anticipate it takes to run the city properly, to provide the services, and to fulfill council goals. The city's costs for the year are up, proposed to be up a little over $3 million, almost $3.2 million, or 12.86%. The school's cost is estimated to be up at $1.8 million, or about 6.5%. We do see some additional revenue from both the city and the schools, approximately $870,000 for each entity, around 5%. So the net increase to the budget is around $3.3 million, or about 18% And that's the net money coming from taxes. I think that's the important thing to look at. Obviously, that's a proposal, and as we go through the council review and workshops, once you get to your decision-making process, then it's in your hands. Any questions about that quickly before we start with code enforcement? Claude?
Well, by an increase in $3 million, are we talking about the tax levy?
Yes, 3.2, almost 3.3.
Thank you.
School and city combined, which I know is significant. Anybody else with a question about the summary before we move to code? Okay. You'll also notice in your budget binders that they are laid out a little differently than they have been before. I've tried to group departments into areas. So in the public safety area is code enforcement, police, and fire. So if you can turn to the code enforcement page. I will have page numbers the next time we meet. I didn't have a chance to put the page numbers on them. You'll also notice, or on my agenda, so I can refer to it, you'll also notice that there is a summary in front of each actual budget sheet that tries to give you an overview of the department to include its mission statement, what its goals are, how many employees, that type of information. My goal with the budget document is to build it each year and add more information to it to try to make it as clear as possible and as transparent for the council as well as the public to view. So under code enforcement, it's always good to start off on a high note here. So we're actually seeing a reduction in the net cost for code enforcement of $90,000 and change.
Well, I'm sorry, just before we start, having, being on the finance committee and seeing this thing grow and seeing this now, I want to say thank you very much for what we have in front of us and the time in which we've got it this year. Over the past 2 years, this is leaps and bounds from where we were 2 years ago. So thank you very much for all of the time and effort that you put into this to get us to this point. So I just want to start off and say thank you very much.
Agreed.
Second that.
Yeah,
So-
here.
I appreciate that.
And just to echo that, this is much more understandable than any of the budgets that I've seen in my 3 years here. Thank you.
Totally.
Good,
Totally.
good. And again, the credit's not all mine. The credit is the department heads. It's also the executive assistant, Sarah Cross. I mean, she puts in a huge amount of time for this. The department heads provide us the information to be able to provide it to you. I ask for it in a certain manner, in a certain method, and they readily jumped at that because they want to provide information. They want you to see, what it takes to run their departments, how many employees are there, and we'll continue adding to that. Again, next year there'll be more information that's provided. There'll be some graphs and some charts and that type of thing, so you can look at trends and all that in a snapshot.
Please make
Graphs
sure.
and charts? Woo, exciting.
Yeah, please make sure Sarah and all those department heads understand how much we appreciate it. Give them all the big high fives and pat on the back.
I will
that they
definitely
need.
pass that along. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so code department, the net cost is down, as I said, $90,000. The main reason for this is simply under the code revenue for building permits. So we anticipate some large projects and several projects applying for building permits in the next fiscal year. So you see an increase of revenue of $99,000, which is significant, which is obviously takes up all of the increase in the expenses. There are, under the code labor costs, the only thing to mention is that, there's a 6% increase in the full-time salaries and wages. This is for 4 individuals in that department, as you'll recall, with our new code compliance officer and our administrative assistant in that department. The group health insurance is down $15,000 just because of employee selection. And you'll see that throughout the budgets of the different departments. The benefits, especially health insurance, fluctuates from year to year based on the employees and what they select. And, again, the narrative throughout the budgets with the departments is that the wages are at the 75th percentile. So some departments have a higher increase than others because some of the members of those departments were already at or close to the 75th. In this instance, there was a 6% increase overall in the full-time wages and salaries to get to that 75th. Under the operating costs for code, there are additional staff, so we have more uniform cost. We have more training costs. We have increased some legal fees under professional services, and that's for helping us enforce the property maintenance ordinance as we continue to do that. One thing I want to highlight under equipment purchases, the last line 44 in that budget, we're planning to purchase 3 iPads for mobile use by the 3 code officers so that they have that at their fingertips and they can make that happen. I'm a big proponent of using technology if we have it, and it makes everybody more efficient. Dan, I don't know if you want to add anything.
That was great. I can't think of anything. Thank you.
So the increase in revenue from a variety of big projects, do you have a list of those?
I did. I took into account not only those, but also historical and trends. What I've seen for changes in the past. Yes, I do have a list back in my office of different projects, some large scale ones.
Microphone.
It's on. Can you hear me now? Guess I wasn't close enough. So yeah, I do have a list not with me, but a couple that stick out.
Falls Village.
Head of Falls Village being one that should start this year, at least be permitted this year. That will have significant permit fees attached to it. There's a hotel on the Armory Road that's coming in. That'll also have significant fees.
What parcel is that going on?
It's actually 2 parcels right now, right on the corner next to the rental business there.
Yeah.
Corner of Armory and Industrial.
Sure. What's that place called? There's some like cannabis.
It's Caswell's, not Caswell's.
No, it's across from
Across
that.
the road, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Theory.
honestly, in my opinion, I think this is conservative because there are other ones that may get permitted this year.
Yeah.
And I tend to be conservative in my estimate when it comes to this. I'd rather be surprised in a good way at the end. But I just don't know for sure. Some projects that have been kicking around for a while, the Lockwood being one, that's a big one. That's going to have a significant part. I did not factor that in this.
Sure.
And there's a good possibility that may happen.
So
And you're fully staffed now so that you're able to take care of the small inspections as well as the big projects?
We are, yes. We're finally at a place that I am confident with what we can do.
yeah, this gets to my question I had too, sort of adjacent to what he was asking. So given the changes that we've made over the past year, you were code, and you in particular as the embodiment of code, was in a kind of a dire place. How would you characterize that change?
Huge, much better, 180-degree turn. We're much more efficient now. We're getting a lot more done, and people aren't so exhausted.
Yeah, stress and morale is what I'm asking about.
Absolutely. Huge difference.
Okay, good.
Being with the fire department as well makes a big difference
Right.
as we do inspections together and we review projects together, look at things from different angles together. We work with them every day. We're just getting an enormous amount of work accomplished right now, and we're not getting stressed out about it.
That's good news.
Yeah, it's really great.
I have a question about the code violation fines and inspection fee line. I noticed there's nothing in the budget for 2023. Is this one of those cases where things got rearranged, or? I'm just wondering what that line 18 consists of.
Well, we have $3,000 in that line item.
That's for the next year.
For this past year, she means.
Oh, for this past year.
Right, I
Okay.
see there's, 2,900 in 2022, and then there's nothing in 2023, and,
So, yeah, that's always one of those things that we never anticipate collecting fines because you just don't know, and it's always a last resort to issue fines.
yeah.
We have collected them in the past. You can see that this year we've as $1,200. It'll probably wind up being more than that once the year is out, but it stands to reason that now we're gonna collect fines in as we're enforcing the property maintenance ordinance a little more proactively. That's kind of part and parcel of that. Yeah. So in the past, it hasn't been anything that previous administration necessarily wanted to make a line item for.
Right.
But now it seems like it's definitely going to happen. So.
Okay. Great. Is there anything else in this budget that you think, you mentioned just a minute ago, we're talking about the Lockwood being something that you had been conservative on, I think. I missed that. Could you just
Sure.
repeat that?
So there's other projects that are being looked at that will conceivably happen that will carry large permit fees that I
Okay.
did not factor into this, which means I think I'm being pretty conservative all around in my estimate of what we will collect for permit fees. The Lockwood being one, I'm confident it will happen probably this year.
Oh, I see. You mean the Lockwood Mill project?
Correct.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, sorry
Yes,
about
yes,
that.
yes. Got it. I'm
But
with you
where
now.
there's been several delays on it,
Yeah.
I didn't factor that in.
Okay,
That could be.
makes sense, yeah.
A 20% increase in this number, or what would that represent?
It could be probably between 5 and 7, I would guess,
Oh, I got you.
just on that.
And it's always hard to
Yeah.
anticipate which projects are going to be, built in the next fiscal year, because we're looking from, remember, excuse me, from July to June of next year. So,
Yeah.
I know the Head of Falls Village project, for example, I know their timeline.
Sure.
So, I know that permit is going to be applied for. I say that, but, I'm 99% sure things could happen.
Sure.
But the Lockwood Mill project, we have no idea if that's going to be in the next fiscal year or not. The Seton Hospital Tower project, for the affordable housing.
Right.
Hopefully, we see a permit for that, but, I'd rather not budget for it and then come in under revenue. And that hurts us in the long run. If we come in over revenue, keeping in mind anything that we over collect for revenue or underspend for expenditures goes into the unassigned fund balance that can be used later on. So it's not that we're not going to collect that. It's just,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on the code budget?
Okay, great.
We're
Thanks.
online, right?
Yes.
Is the public allowed to ask questions?
It's a workshop, so generally
It's
they're
a
not.
workshop,
Got you. Okay.
but there's no one online, so we'll move
Thank you.
ahead.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan.
So up next is the police department's budget. And this is one we go from good news to bad news. This shows a net cost increase of $593,000, which is about 12.5%. Mainly, if you look at the net law enforcement cost, is up about $466,000. And again, what I mentioned in my summary of an overview is that this is essentially all labor costs. This is for the wages that were approved in the union contracts that were adjusted upwards. I do use in the law enforcement revenue, I'm recommending that we use $100,000 of the opioid settlement revenue to help offset the costs. And that can be directly tied to our community outreach coordinator position, as well as a portion of our Operation Hope response. So I think $100,000 is probably a conservative amount that we could use. What I'm looking at is our actual receipts of opioid money during this fiscal year. and we've brought in like $110,000 or something along those lines. And then we'll be bringing in additional revenue each year. So we're kind of using already the revenue that we've collected instead of anticipating more additional revenue, even though that will be coming in. That can also be used by council in from future orders or requests, should we decide to ask for funding for a vehicle for the community outreach coordinator, for example. So we don't want to use, fully all of that money up, but it helps offset the costs, and it's directly for substance abuse, really, when it comes down to it.
Sure.
And it is allowed by the legal settlement. Under full-time salaries and wages, again, for under law enforcement, we're up $404,000. Union contract changes. This does include also some of the anticipated recommendations from the IACP study, as I had stated earlier. The operating costs, the police department is one of those where we've broken out some lines, so you'll see some lines that are empty. Particularly the utilities line is empty. It shows a $22,000 decrease, but those are absorbed in other areas within the budget where there weren't lines previously, such as electricity is one of those lines that takes up some of that, what appears to be a reduction when it really isn't. I do want to say as well, and I'm skipping all over the place, but under the communications center, this budget does allow for Waterville to become a public safety answering point, a PSAP, a 911 center. And if you look at the revenue under the communications center, which is line 132, it states PSAP users fees. So these are the contracts that will be, the money from the contracts of the communities that in the northern part of Kennebec County that will be contracting with the city, or we anticipate will contract with the city for those 911 services. The contracted funds do cover the costs for that PSAP service. So we've managed, and when I say we, it's really Bill, Interim Chief Bonnie, and Communications Supervisor Sarah Batiste, who have done all of the legwork on this. I've provided some guidance, but they've done all of the legwork and have come to a solution that will work very well. It's been communicated to the communities that will be serviced by the PSAP, and I haven't heard anything negative.
I have not either.
Yeah, they're very...
So I just wanted to ask Interim Chief Bonnie if he would share with the rest of the council what he shared with the Finance Committee, because I thought it was very ingenious, the solution, and it makes, I think it would be good for everyone to hear how we got to this point, which is impressive.
Sure. So we put a lot of work into trying to figure out how we could be fair to both the city of Waterville and to our customer communities. And so one of the concerns was Androscoggin County is taking on PSAP services for the communities in southern Kennebec that were being dropped by Somerset. So that left the 9 communities in northern Kennebec County that we serve without a PSAP. Androscoggin County is charging $450 per capita for PSAP services. And so I was very concerned that if we were significantly above that, our customers would feel like they were getting a raw deal, and to some extent they would be. So we went through a variety of staffing experiments, trying to figure out how many staff do we actually need to make this successful. And we ended up with a 12-hour schedule for the dispatchers, which is something that they've been looking for. And in order to satisfy FLSA, we'll provide them with 8 hours of overtime every other week. And then every other week we'll save 4 hours because they'll only be working 36 hours. But they were all very much looking forward to that, and we'll add a 10th dispatcher. And doing it in that manner, we're able to put on, at $450 per capita, 10 dispatchers, a civilian communications supervisor, and
2 additional part-time staff to fill in if we discover spots where we need to supplement staffing.
Nice work.
And how are the conversations been going with the neighboring communities? Is everybody on board, or are we still at lining people up?
Sure. So I've spoken with the chiefs in those communities, and they are on board. They obviously have to talk to their city administration, but I've not heard any negative comments at this time. And, you know, $450 per capita is a fair price. It's the going rate right now. And so I think everybody realizes that.
You said 9 communities.
Well, I think there was a story in the paper about one of the local communities that was concerned that it was a substantial increase over what they had been paying. And as I understand, that was one of the problems, is we were underpaying Somerset County.
That's right. So Somerset County was doing it for between 161 and 263 per capita. And one of the reasons that they're not doing it any longer is because it's not sustainable at those rates. And so while we would love to be able to do that, that's just not the market anymore. And 450 really is a fair rate.
And I think the other thing that you mentioned when we talked earlier was that you've changed some of the supervisory staff. Would you explain that?
Sure. So in the past, the communication center was supervised by a police sergeant. Right now, and we believe the IACP study will recommend this, and we believe it's the right thing, the comm center is being supervised by a civilian. It does a couple things. We dispatch for 9 fire departments, so it gives them a chance to feel like they're more equally represented, because when you have a police sergeant supervising the comm center, it can make people feel like, you know, the police department is being more represented than the fire department. So now we have equal representation. The civilian supervisor is doing a great job. She's very responsive. And now our dispatchers have an additional career path to look forward to when they come into the agency. Because before, there was no place for them to go. It was, you come in, you're a dispatcher, and 25 years later, you're still a dispatcher. So now we're expanding their career opportunities as well.
And I just wanted to touch base to the neighboring community that you're referring to. I spoke with their manager today, and when I asked her about the increase for the PSAP services, she said, "Yeah, I thought it'd be more than that, actually." So, they're appreciative. The communities are appreciative that they have an option, because they really are over a barrel. They don't have another option. We're the only ones. We could have been that guy that said, "Hey, here's a money-making opportunity," but it doesn't make sense to do that. We want to partner with our communities that are around us, provide a service, obviously not costing the Waterville taxpayers money. And that's what this does. It doesn't cost our taxpayers money to provide this service. And it actually gives a better service for our residents, because when you call 911, the call is coming to our dispatch center now, or it will be. Now it currently goes to Somerset County and then gets bounced to Waterville to dispatch our crews within Waterville. In the future, when we're at the PSAP, the call will come to our dispatchers, and it will immediately go to our emergency services for dispatch. So it actually saves time, saves response time as well. And that's recognized actually by the other communities. They see that, and they appreciate the fact that, whether it's 30 seconds or whether it's a minute, that can save somebody's life.
So that'd be line 138, then. That includes the extra dispatcher that's going to be hired. And does it also include a new salary level for the supervisor?
Yes.
So that's all included in that line?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Just out of curiosity, like, why wouldn't Somerset just change the price? Like, why wouldn't they just, you know what I mean? Like, why? Like, what do they just want to? Like, they're still doing it for their community or whoever they're doing it for now, right? Like, so do they just want out of the game, or like, why wouldn't if the going rate was this and they were considerably less than that, why wouldn't they just say, hey, this is where we're at, guys, and leave it, go from there? Like,
Sure. At the risk of speaking for their director, which I definitely don't want to do.
sure, yeah.
I do
In your
think,
opinion.
yeah, I do think that they're having some staffing issues up there, and they have a very high call volume, and 50.2% of their calls were coming from Kennebec County towns. And so they said, I think we have an opportunity here to improve morale and really take better care of Somerset County residents by not renewing these contracts. So I believe that was the reason.
Okay.
And I wanted to add one other point too, about the call volume. So it may sound a little odd if it says, we're going to be taking on a huge number of emergency calls, and why are we only going to be adding one full-time dispatcher? Well, that's not necessarily the case, because we're already handling a large majority of those calls because we dispatch for so many communities as it is. So those calls would go to Somerset and then come to us, and we dispatch them anyway. So now I think, would you say 5,000 calls more is what you anticipate?
Just under 5,000 is what we anticipate, and I work together with the ESCB to figure out those numbers.
The other thing that you mentioned in the Finance Committee discussion was that this really is an improved service because of the fact that someone who's calling 911 doesn't have to explain themselves twice, and that's a huge redundancy or inefficiency in the other system, especially for someone who's experiencing an emergency. So just to have that single point of contact is going to be great, I think.
Absolutely.
And we're not going to be cramped for space in the current space that we have?
We should be all set. We have 3 workstations set up now with the ability to set up a 4th one. And so it's really not going to be changing anything other than adding 2 monitors and some hardware in the server room.
Do you feel like the IT services, the IT support for that call center is adequate?
Yes, because the state actually handles all of the PSAP equipment. So that's theirs. If something goes wrong with it, it might require Joel to stand by in the server room with them, but they take care of all of that.
Are there other questions around the police department budget in its entirety? I know that we spend a lot of time on the comm center, which is important because that's a new program that we're going to be offering. But it is beneficial that it's not costing Waterville taxpayers any more money, and yet we'll get better service as well, which is a good thing. Again, most of the makeup of the increase is based in wages for this department, based on those union contracts, as well as the anticipated recommendations from the IACP study.
So
Well, that begs one last question on the call center. Was the staff there, were they included in our increases in our wage study?
Yes, because
were.
the
So they're-
dispatchers are not union, so those are 75th percentile. Yes.
Yeah. So, which begs the question of hiring in a very tight labor market.
We were very successful filling our last open position in dispatch recently, within the last month or so. So I anticipate we'll still be very competitive when it comes to the salary and the benefits for that full-time dispatcher. We're not in the same situations that we are in some of the other dispatch, the other PSAPs, where they have huge numbers of openings. And I don't know if that's wages or if that's culture, but I think certainly having our study done and bringing our rates up for those dispatchers certainly has made a big difference, as it has for all the positions that we have. The city of our size, the handful of openings that we have, while we still have some and some are difficult to fill, such as mechanics, because a mechanic can get a job at Central Maine Motors, for $20 more an hour than what we're paying. Those are difficult positions, but we have a creative solution for that. But for the most part, we really don't have a huge number of openings compared to some of the other communities.
This is a very minor question, but and it's really just for my edification. When I look at the heating fuel and I see that we budgeted 10K for this year, and that seems like a reasonable amount to budget. So I'm on line 77, but that number hasn't gone up for our ask this year. We burned through 1,600. I don't know if that's on track for quarter two or not, but I know heating costs fuel. I'm assuming that's fuel oil.
It is.
I know that has skyrocketed this past year. Is 10K going to be enough, or?
Yeah, I think so. If we look at the history, in the 2 previous years, we spent 7,000 and 6,000. And while the prices have gone up, we also are under a contract for heating fuel. So we lock in the price, and that,
Gotcha.
I believe, runs through this winter coming up.
Okay.
I may be incorrect, but it's not like you or I buying heating fuel off the street, so the number of gallons that we have tends to get us a much better price, even though it does fluctuate, certainly, from one year to the next.
Gotcha.
But heating fuel is also back down again, so.
Yeah. I was just trying to understand those numbers a little bit.
Well, generally, Tom, we make a guess at the fuel and gasoline when we're doing the budget, but when push comes to shove and the department heads go out and negotiate the contracts, well, we find out what we can actually get.
Sure, I know. My question was, why did the ask remain flat when we knew we had that?
So,
Yeah.
did you say that the price is locked in for
Yes.
this next year? So,
Yes, I don't remember what it is off the top of my head.
okay,
but
so
it-
it's not going up next year.
Right, so and again, if you look at past history of what we've expended, I think we've got more than enough to cover. And again, if it goes over, the department head is going to be instructed to make sure it's covered from another line, so.
Yeah.
And this is just in the headquarters there.
Yes, the police station.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about line 94, the armory weapons?
Sure, I'll turn that one over to Bill. That's one of those lines that was separated out from another
I
category.
figured it was, but,
And
yeah.
actually, I think it was in training, wasn't it?
It was in training.
Okay.
So I think the logic was that most of the time when we're using armory and weapons, it's for training, and so that's why it was there. But it really needed to come out so we could track exactly what we're doing and as Bill said, make it more transparent.
And if you do look at line 69, that's where the training line is. There's a reduction there of almost 22,000, so it's not a full difference of the 32,000 for the armory. And the reason for that is that we do anticipate sending 2 of the patrol officers to the Maine Criminal Justice Academy within the next fiscal year, because we have been hiring new employees. And this also, that line is sending our officers to the community policing program through the University of Maine at Augusta, we've mentioned before in the council meetings. Fortunately, we got the expense there, but up under the revenue line, there's a miscellaneous revenue line that has an increase in it. We have a grant to help send those officers to the community policing program at UMA. So we do have an offset of that.
Can you tell me what happened to the body camera initiative that we had been talking about?
Sure, we're still talking about it.
Yeah.
I'll turn it over to Bill.
But that's not in this budget anywhere, is it?
No.
We bonded for that money, and so the bond is sitting there, and it was a project that we didn't get completed before Chief Massey retired, and I was full speed ahead on it in January because it's one of my top priorities. I believe we need to get it done.
Yeah.
But then on January 19th, I got a visit from the Director of Emergency Management in Somerset County, and the PSAP then became the top issue on my list. And so absolutely, once we get the PSAP thing taken care of, we'll get right back on the cameras.
Yeah, can you estimate a timeline on that?
As soon as we get this done, I want to get on it. I've gotten new estimates already because the estimates were stale.
Yeah, right.
So I've already gotten new estimates from all 3 of the vendors that we were speaking with. And so now it will be a matter of sitting down with Bill and deciding what's going to be best for the city, expense wise.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions?
Well, yeah, so just to go back to the training and conferences line, did that contain anything else other than the armory weapons, or was that broken out into other lines?
That was just those two, training and
Okay.
conferences and the armory. Yep. And I remembered that once I started reviewing the budget with Interim Chief Bonney, when I saw that, I went, yeah, I had a question about that last year as to why we had the armory within the training line. I mean, I can understand why it's tied there, because most of our armory is expended during training exercises, thankfully, right? I mean, that's what we want, is it expended during training and not during live situations. So it makes sense, but I think it makes more sense to break it out so that we can actually see it there.
So this line includes both weapons that are used during training and those that are used in the field?
It's all armory. Yeah, it's all
Okay,
weapons. Yep.
thank you.
Other questions?
You call armory weapons, do you differentiate between armory and ordnance, or just you put it all together?
It's all together. So ammunition, weapons, tasers, taser cartridges, that sort of thing is in there.
You project that medical and dental lab services are going up. What is that? Is that like forensics lab stuff?
Correct.
Yeah. Why does that? I mean, I see a pretty. I guess 2021 was higher, and then it dipped in 2022. But why is that? Is that inflation, or what are we looking at there?
Everything's more expensive right now, and so when we send stuff to the state lab or we have to send it out to be tested, oftentimes that falls back on us. So
Yeah.
that's why that went up.
I mean, for that kind of service, it's actually a pretty paltry amount, actually. But it just was questioning
In
that.
line 42, the MDA agent reimbursement. Oh, that's a revenue. Okay, yeah.
Yes, and that's assuming a 6-month revenue on that. So if
Okay.
once we get fully staffed, then we would like to put one of the officers of ours with the MDEA that would be working in the Waterville area. But the state would then reimburse at state trooper detective pay. They don't reimburse what our cost is.
Okay.
So I'm sure that we'll make sure that our cost is less than what their reimbursement is. Or we will try to.
Great. And one other question. So the $175,000, that's an estimate for increased costs due to the study. Is that entirely labor? And is
Yeah.
that all that's in 49 somewhere?
It is
Spread over those lines?
It is all labor. Yes, it is spread over law enforcement labor costs, but it's also spread over into the communications side where we're moving,
Okay.
as Chief Bonney had said, from a sworn sergeant as a supervisor in the comm center to a civilian supervising the comm center. We believe that will be one of the recommendations in the study, so it's included in that line as well as in the law enforcement labor cost as well. And of course, it covered in the benefits, all of that. I mean, that's, if we're looking at adding we'll say a deputy chief level position, then it's obviously a higher paid position, but it also includes health insurance and
Sure.
main state retirement and the like.
Anyone else?
Like this budget so much more than last year. It's just so much easier to
It's
look
going-
at.
Pretty quickly, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Bill.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.
So up next is the fire department. And you'll notice we tried to start off with the big departments for you to see the largest impact first and foremost, even though next week before the council meeting, we go to some of the lighter departments, but that's because you're before a council meeting so that we can get through a bunch of those first. So the fire department's budget, we're looking at a proposed decrease of about $50,000. And I can tell you that that is completely in the fact that the fire chief put in his operating budget a vehicle for the fire chief. He does not have a vehicle. Both of our deputy chiefs have them. He put that in this budget. I moved it into the capital budget because it's an item that will last us longer than 3 years. That fire chief's vehicle should last us well more than that. So it's more of a capital expense. I should have said that in the police side of it. We're budgeting for one replacement cruiser. That's an operating expense because generally they last us about 3 years. And so by our policy, a capital item lasts more than 3 years. So that's the difference in this budget, essentially. Obviously, there are a ton of differences throughout the budget when we go down through it. Full-time salaries and wages, we do have a 4% union contract increase built into that. There is a 75th percentile for the non-union wages as well. So you see a roughly $80,000 increase in fire protection labor costs. There are some differences in health insurance, dental insurance based on employee choices for that. Under the fire protection operating cost, overall, there's about a $58,000 increase. There are several lines that are different. Another one of these lines where we've separated out is the utilities line. So you see a $47,000 decrease, but that's broken out into water, sewer, electricity, so that you can see those as we move forward. We do have a $10,000 decrease in heating fuel. The reason for that is because they've converted to natural gas completely at the fire station. Travel, you'll see a decrease of $12,500 because that was it was lumped in with training and travel before. So it's another one of those lines we've tried to break out. I skipped over hydrant rental, which is kind of a big increase. So $32,000 increase in hydrant rental, and that's an 8%, I believe, increase.
It is.
There's a 2-year increase started last year it was approved by the PUC on water rates. So there was 8% last year, 8% this year. And that's one thing we have no control over whatsoever. Under the PPE, which is personal protective equipment, line 85, there's a $10,000 increase. That covers, I believe, 8 sets of turnout gear, Chief?
Actually, it only covers 2 nowadays.
Only covers 2 now. Great. I'm just scrolling down. So once we get to EMS, which is probably will be a highlight of discussion tonight, you'll see in the revenue line for the net EMS cost, overall the EMS cost shows a decrease of $184,000 net, mainly because of the increase in revenue, estimating an increase in revenue of $350,000 on the EMS side. And that's based on some projections from Chief Essler on the number of calls that we're seeing, plus the amount of revenue that's coming in for the EMS program. Under the labor cost, again, we have a 4% increase in the union contract. We have multiple employees that have had license upgrades, so instead of being an EMT 1, we'll say, maybe they're at a paramedic level, so their pay is higher. And we also had the benefit of hiring experienced employees with those higher licensing levels when we implemented the EMS transport 911 service during this year. Some decreases under the benefits based on the employee selection again. Under EMS operating costs, a lot of differences down through here. The medical billing contract, that's based on the new billing contract the council approved previously. We expect to actually see higher revenue from that as well from our old provider, I should say. EMS training is $15,000 included in there, and that's to send one staff to paramedic school and an additional staff training as well for the EMS employees.
I have a question. Did we hire the position that was indicated for training in the EMS department?
So I have not hired that
Oh,
position
okay.
as of right now.
Okay.
I have the posting ready to go, and that's, and Bill and Bobby have given us permission to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the current operating budget and the way it's kind of shook out a little bit, I wanted to make sure that we were, before we hired that position, that we covered any overages in the current budget. I'm just trying to be fiscally responsible.
Okay. And that position is covered in this budget?
It is.
No. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Chief Essler, is there anything else that you want to highlight that I haven't?
No, you've done a great job. I'm interested to take any questions that councilors might have and help explain the budget.
Well, I have a question about how you've allocated your cost between, your labor cost between fire and EMS. And let me say right off the bat that because fire and EMS personnel are undifferentiable, they're all paid out of they all get paid out of the same payroll account, correct?
Well, when you say undifferentiatable, there are firefighters and EMTs that are assigned to fire trucks, and there are firefighter EMTs, and in some cases firefighter paramedics that are assigned to ambulances. We also have 4 fire medic positions that aren't able to operate fire trucks that are currently assigned to ambulances. So those that are operating on an ambulance are paid from the EMS budget, and those that are operating on a fire truck as their primary role are allocated to be paid from the fire protection line.
But if, I thought we created a special firefighter position for somebody who was not capable of driving the fire truck, but could help out on the ground at a fire.
Yeah, that's called the fire medic's position.
Yes.
They're primarily assigned to an ambulance. They provide paramedic level care on our EMS calls, and they can help out on a fire ground. So they could help with accountability. They could dress a hydrant. They could certainly provide medical care to somebody that was involved in the fire, but they're not trained or capable of operating a fire apparatus.
Yes. So my point being that it doesn't seem to me that there are hard lines between, we've got different categories, but everybody's part of the fire department.
There are certainly hard lines when it comes to budgeting. So again, those that work in ambulance as their primary mission are allocated in the EMS budget. Those that work a fire truck as their primary mission are in the fire protection line. Do they cross over from time to time? They absolutely do. There is no doubt from time to time they cross over. It's much like taking a Parks and Rec worker and having them plow snow in the wintertime, or a plow truck driver, helping out Parks and Rec for the day. They have similar functions, but different roles.
So that brings me to my next question, is what is the allocation of work between fire and EMS. In other words, how many calls does the department respond to annually?
We're gonna do just over 6,000 calls, I would say. I pulled the numbers today so that I would have them as far as fiscal year 2022. Sorry, there's a lot of information here. So far in fiscal year 2022, we've done 4,666 total calls for service. And EMS call-outs represent 3,800 of those.
So about 80% of your calls are EMS calls.
Yeah, that's typical of every fire department in the state of Maine.
Yes. So if the EMS is doing 80% of the work, then it would seem to me that they would be accountable for 80% of the cost.
Again, I don't agree with that theory because fire protection, we have to have a certain degree of fire protection, and if I subscribe to that theory that 80% of my budget is allocated to EMS, and City Council came and said, I want to cut EMS out of my budget, we'd be looking at an 80% reduction of our current staffing, which would put us with one person driving one fire truck, one person driving another fire truck, and we don't even have the capacity to handle routine call-outs. So if you're evaluating the allocation of funding based on 80% should be dedicated to EMS, then you can consider that we essentially wouldn't have the ability to provide fire protection for the city.
Yeah, there is a standby cost when it comes to fire protection, very much like there is with snow plowing, or some of the other things that we have. Fire protection is one of those obvious ones where we hope that we don't have a fire call. We don't want to have that happen, but when we do, we have to have the resources available to be able to respond to that call. So there is a cost there that's just a make ready cost that is not, wouldn't translate to 20% of our staffing cost.
And that same sort of analysis does not apply to EMS?
There is certainly a cost of readiness as it relates to EMS. And as outlined in the budget, if we're going to see, again, if we see call out similar to last year, which there's no projection that call volume is going to decrease. Obviously, we can't predict a pandemic, but, the numbers have been fairly steady. We bring in $1.6 million in the cost of EMS. Transport EMS is $1.8 million. Our cost of readiness would be the net cost of the program. So our cost to have firefighters and EMTs available at a moment's notice to respond to an emergency call would be about $260,000, or what's outlined here. So that would be considered the cost of readiness.
Well, I'm afraid I still don't quite understand the distinction between EMS readiness and fire readiness, particularly if 80% of your work is being done on the EMS side of the ledger. It seems to me that that's where the cost ought to be allocated.
And I think the overall answer is that it's a fire and rescue department, very much like Public Works has several different programs that are within Public Works. We have solid waste removal, we have Parks and Recs is different, but we have fleet maintenance, we have street highway maintenance. I mean, they're all different programs within the Public Works department. EMS is a program within the fire and rescue department.
I'm a pretty simple guy. So am I wrong in thinking that when you say the number of calls and the readiness, so the number of people that you need to respond to an EMS call right, would be far less, right, than you would need to for a fire call. There's a fire call, right? That's, you get one call, and you could have in upwards of 15, 20 people required to respond to that call. Versus if someone had, chest issues or whatever, and they call an ambulance, you're sending 2 people to that call, even though but you're getting more calls for just two people versus the number of calls that you get for, where you have to bring everybody. Is that kind of that kind of makes sense, right?
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, okay.
National standards, NFPA 1710 references national model for fire staffing. And they say that in order to start an effective operation on a single family residence, you have to have a minimum of 16 people to start a fire. How do we get to those numbers? We get to those numbers by full-time staffing first. Secondly, our call force, which does an excellent job in this community and has for 200 years at this point. And then thirdly, mutual aid companies.
Right.
And as staffing decreases for all of us in all of our surrounding communities, we're calling mutual aid more often. And you're seeing that, a typical house fire now, there's 10 departments. And why do we need all these departments? It's because we're getting 3 firefighters from this one, and 2 firefighters from this department, and 4 from this one. It's a real struggle for staffing. While our call force is great, they do a phenomenal job. Our call force is second to none in Central Maine. The only real reliable staff, 100% of the time, is those that we're paying on duty.
Chief Essler, I have a quick question. You have 3 shifts for your house, right?
I
A,
have
B, and C?
4.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
How many are on a, say, A shift? How many are on?
So we have budgeted for 8, but on a normal day, there is 7.
So 7 in the house. How many, say, for instance, in an EMS shift, how many do you have on?
So that is the shift.
Okay,
So out of those 7, we have 2
2 allocated for EMS.
We have 4 allocated for EMS.
Okay.
So 2 would be on one ambulance, 2 would be on a second ambulance. And bear in mind, those ambulances run all day, every day.
Absolutely.
And then we put 1 on our engine, we put 1 on our tower truck, and then we have 1 supervisor that can either ride on one of the fire trucks or take a pickup and take control and command of the scene.
So basically, you have, say, for instance, there's a fully involved structure fire, barring any mutual aid that obviously may be requested, you have 7 people showing up to that fire, correct? And
If there's not a medical call.
Right.
And for example, you take School Street, that's a fairly large fire. That
Indeed.
required a lot of resources. I had an ambulance tied up on a medical call. That medical call at that point in time takes priority. So I show up with, and in this case, I showed up with 4.
Thank you very much. I mean, it sounds like you guys are working, together, and it's obviously a team effort in order to be able to run that firehouse efficiently with the staff that you have, correct?
When you use the word efficiency, I look across the state and I utilize data to make decisions. And when we came to the council last year, I presented what I felt was the bare minimum, was the absolute bare minimum to complete this task. There were several options that we could have done. One of our options was working with Delta to call share. One of our options was staffing 1 ambulance and getting another one. I recently visited Auburn. The fire chief invited me down there, and I participated in a battalion chief's process. And I asked him, I said, how many personnel do you guys got down here? How many calls do you run? He said, well, I run about 6,200 calls. I said, great. That's what we're running in Waterville. He said, how many guys do you got per shift? He says, I have 16 per shift. I said, 16? And you're complaining about staffing? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, we're doing the same amount of call volume, but we're twice as efficient. And literally, if you look at the budgets, the revenue is pretty darn close in Auburn, but the expense is double. what we're presenting here today. So I would ask the council to look across the state at what a well-established fire and EMS system like Augusta or Auburn or Bangor or Sanford or Brunswick or any of the departments, and then I would like you to compare it to our budget. We are trying to do the best we can with what we have in the most efficient manner, and I will tell you the reason why we are so successful is born on the backs of our employees. They are the best in the business. They're hands down, there is no question. They're doing more with less, and this is the most fiscally responsible budget at this point that I can put in front of this council.
Chief, I certainly in no way doubt any of that. I think I came into this room knowing that's the way you run your ship, and I really appreciate that. The question I have for you, and I've already asked this I asked this of Dan. I lament not asking this of Chief Bonney when he was in here. I should have, but given the doing more with less and what you're asking of your team, I am, and particularly in light of the fact that the city has been, Bill is amazing. We're so fortunate to have him.
I agree.
Yeah, Bill's amazing, but we have been going through this city management transition. I'm concerned and want to make sure that the morale that in all of the departments is where I would like it to be. I'm concerned that the city employees feel supported. Can you just speak to that a little bit? Like what's the mood on your team? Where is it right now?
I'm going to answer that before you do, because he sees it every day. I'm in the fire station maybe once a week, definitely every couple of weeks. And when I go into the fire station, there's utmost respect from the employees for me and my position. There's utmost respect for the leadership structure within the fire department. The fire station is gleaming because it's clean and it's organized. I hear laughter. I see smiles. I see groups of employees that are sitting around tables talking about a plan or talking about a scenario or things like that. When I see that type of thing, I know that the morale is good. But again, I only see that occasionally when I'm coming in. Chief Essler is ensconced in it on a daily basis. But I wanted to give you my perspective on that, Counselor.
Is telling me the truth here, John?
I certainly will never say that we have a perfect organization, but it's pretty darn close. And what I mean by that is we have people that genuinely wake up in the morning and they want to come to work. And the best example that I can use of that is during COVID. COVID, everything shut down. Our firefighters said, "How can we help? Let's staff this building. Let's make sure these ambulances are running." And quite frankly, when private EMS was dropping ambulances and unable to staff seats, we were able to maintain full staffing the entire time. The biggest impact to morale was the investment that the council made in our organization in several strides. The first one definitely has to be the schedule and the contract that we negotiated. Our firefighter works a 24-hour shift. They then have 24 hours off. They come back for another 24 hours. And to be honest with you, they are, for lack of better terms, pounded into the ground. They're running a lot of calls. They're tired when they go home. But implementing that fourth shift gave them the opportunity to have 5 days off. So I'm seeing people hike mountains. I'm seeing people get projects around the house done. I'm seeing people spending more time with family. I'm seeing a couple of our firefighters working at dispatch for a little extra time. I'm seeing a lot of productivity out of staff. When they come in, my deal with them or my expectation is when you're here, you're going to give us 150%. But when you're not, I want you to disconnect from the fire service. This morning I sat through a portion of a lecture with the Mid-Maine Chamber of Commerce, and the lecture was on mental health. And you know, it's important that the fire department is engaged in the community at all levels, but this particular presentation really spoke to us. And it's about creating that work-life balance. Wages certainly helped. Our wages were extremely low, $15 an hour. They're now, you know, starting wage of $20 an hour. That's incredibly helpful. And then lastly, our paramilitary organization allows our leadership to really prosper and really effectively manage personnel. And then the last thing that the council really did is when we decided to put forth this EMS venture, yes, I asked for what I felt was the bare minimum, but that included a deputy EMS chief that has since gone and opened the doors to every healthcare facility and every healthcare organization in the city of Waterville to really to be proactive and say, what's going on? What do we need? How can we help? And the city of Waterville is here for you. And that has been absolutely incredible. We've had Rotary groups come through the fire station. We have had group meetings, and we are engaging with our community on a level that we have never been able to do. So the long, short answer to your question is the investments that have been made by this council over the last 2 years is sustaining high morale in the fire department, and I cannot thank you enough.
Well,
I have one. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you know, we did have a lot of discussions about this last year, and I feel like the council did take a leap of faith with you. But I have to say, looking at these numbers, you know, I think it was the right decision. We're tracking exactly where we should be according to these numbers, based on your estimates, and the fact that this department is showing a slight decrease in this budget year is really impressive. So I'm, you know, I just want to thank you for all the work you did, really being thoughtful about how we could move forward with our fire and EMS in a way that was so efficient.
I really appreciate that. We had goals, and I'll outline 5 of them. Maintain 2 ambulances dedicated to the city of Waterville to handle our call-outs. Maintain the fire department's ability to provide adequate fire protection as well, rescue services. Maintain our community's ability to provide effective mutual aid. That was a goal of ours. And maintain a system where we don't overutilize mutual aid. That was a concern. And then 5th, and equally as important, is maintain a working relationship with Delta. And, you know, one of the concerns was revenue. You know, the primary concern of this council and myself was providing the services to the resident. I want to be very clear. But revenue was a question mark. And we had projected $1.2 million in revenue for this fiscal year that we're currently in. And I'm pleased to report that we have already met that goal, and we have 3 more months to go. And we are tracking at about $130,000 per month. So we expect that we will be $200,000 to $300,000 over our projection from last year.
Well, one of the things that I always like about you, Sean, is that you've got the metrics. You always have them at your fingertips. And whenever I ask for them, if you don't have them at the fingertips, you can go get them. Let me ask you just one final thing, if you might have at your fingertips. You almost doubled your staff last year. How did we make out in terms of diversity?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. Here's what I know off the top of my head. We hired a record number of female employees. I can tell you that 100%. We did not hire any African-American employees. There was no applicants at that time. We did just hire an Asian employee. Beyond that, I don't have any specific statistics.
How big were your applicant pools compared to historical trends? I know that they've been down. Have they recovered?
So I only have put out for one process, and that was back in July.
I got you.
And we maintained a list, and we hired all of the employees required, including the recent employee, which was about a month ago off from that list. So I have not even advertised positions, essentially since last July. Our applicant pool for our EMS deputy was what I would consider large, 12 quality applicants. We hired EMS deputy Everett Flannery, who's a 20-year paramedic from Reddington Fairview. And he brings with him a whole host of healthcare education and knowledge. And quite frankly, he knows a lot of people in the healthcare world. And he has been really key to our operation in kicking down the doors of these healthcare organizations and in really starting to build a rapport with our healthcare workers. And, we're not perfect. We do have issues from time to time. If you know firefighters and paramedics' personalities tend to get the best of you from time to time, police officers as well. So if there's an issue, with a personality conflict between a nurse and a paramedic, we put boots on the ground right then and there. We don't wait. We have the administrative staff to go take care of an issue. That has worked wonders for us. We don't have lingering issues, and we're able to solve problems. And that was something that me as the fire chief with no support, I just couldn't do. I just couldn't do. And I don't want to brag all night here about the department, but we will be forwarding to the council a quality improvement and a clinical standards report. And that's an evaluation of how well we are doing. And that was one of the things that we really admired about Delta Ambulance, was their ability to track and understand clinical and medical data, decipher it to prove, man, my clinical standards are high. And my hat's off to Delta Ambulance because they did a great job. Well, here to tell you, ours are going to be better. So in 3 months' time, we've been able to reproduce a 30-year QI program. And we're going to be sharing that with the council very soon.
I know we're here to talk about this year's budget, but can you give us a sense of what's on the horizon?
So I think as the community grows, our law enforcement, our city services, and of course our fire department are going to have to grow with it at some point. We are busy. We are a very busy department. I told you when I sat down last year that we would be good for a while. I think that will be the case. I just don't know how long. Year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, I don't know. It will all depend on how many housing units go in. If I showed you a heat map of all the places we land an ambulance or a fire truck in the city of Waterville, it is covered. The entire map of Waterville is black. And the point I'm trying to make here is that the more housing we add, the more people we bring in, while it will be relatively safe housing, that's not going to protect against chest pain or stub toe or somebody having a baby or cardiac arrest or something along those lines. So we're going to have to grow with that organization or with our city. And I think we got some creative ways to do it. So number one, going to have to grow. Number two, I believe that at some point in time, we're going to have to engage with our community partners to bring services to those less fortunate. And there are a couple people that, there's a couple demographic groups that come to mind. One of them is our homeless population, and the other is our elderly population that simply just can't get out and get services. And I think we can partner with our hospitals to help prevent readmission into the hospital, to do follow-ups, and most importantly, to bring services to someone that might be homeless or there are services in Waterville that are available, but sometimes we need to be a little bit more proactive. So one of the things that we have built into the budget is, it's called a community response line. We didn't know what to call it, to be honest with you. It's $2,000. And our intent is to do some outreach with our homeless population, make sure that they have basic necessities. So toothbrushes, shampoo. The other thing we intend to use that line for is, sometimes we go to a car accident and a kid's bike is totaled. And we wanted a mechanism where the city of Waterville's money, essentially, what little bit is allocated to this line would directly impact the community. And if we could replace that bike and then and move on, we might make that family's year. I don't know.
What line are we talking about here? What number is that?
Yeah, that's line
97.
97, yeah. There's just a couple of $1,000s in there, and I'm glad that Chief Essler is highlighting that. I mean, it's only a couple of $1,000s, and I've told him and the police chief as well that if I get a phone call in the middle of the night or whenever it is, and there's a request because they've overspent this line, or they don't have any funding in their budget, but they want to provide a blanket to somebody, or they want to do, something along the lines that Chief Essler said, is that, yes, they're going to do that. I want them to do that. That's all part of the community policing model as well, as we know.
Yeah.
We want to be doing these types of things. It's a small gesture that means a huge amount for our community, whether it's that kid, whether it's that homeless person, whether it's the elderly person, or whoever it is. It doesn't matter. It's a small thing that we can do. I wanted to kind of answer your question a little bit more too, Councilor Klepak. We did meet today with another community, and one of those conversations that we had was around public safety, around EMS services and the like. When I first became acting manager, I was asked by several communities, can Waterville come provide EMS services to us? And my answer to them was no, we can't do that. We're not set up for that. We're not ready for that. Those of you that are on the public safety working group understand that. We had that conversation. But the conversation we had today with the neighboring community was, we need to get all of us together, all of the communities in the area, and have discussions. Some of it will just be discussions, but there might be things where we're looking at solving problems together. It's not Waterville becoming the regional EMS provider. It's not Waterville becoming the regional police provider. It's let's figure this out so that we're all relying on each other to solve problems, and hopefully doing it efficiently, but definitely effectively. Mm-hmm. So those conversations have started. Good. So we are growing. Waterville's growing. We recognize that. We're going to need help from other communities as well, whether it's a mutual aid response to a fire in the middle of the night, or it's a backup for an EMS call because our rigs are out helping our residents, just as the other communities are going to need that. So, we've started that conversation. I'm really looking forward to that and moving forward as we go. I'm sure the next city manager will be on board with that as well. But to see the department heads that we have are supportive of that, and they recognize it. They understand the problems. They understand that we're not the ones that are going to solve the problems. We're just a part of the solution.
Yeah.
Going forward.
That's very encouraging, because that was something we were saying last year about this time, was we need to go in that direction. So it's really wonderful that started. So thank you.
Just a comment. It was extremely refreshing, to be honest with you. It was forward progress, and I got to hand it to Bill. He's really done a great job with bringing our neighbors together. And I got to witness it firsthand today and got to participate. And I'm just really proud of the city. I'm proud of our leadership, and that includes all of you sitting at the table. And I think we have a lot to contribute to that group setting.
Seems like I'm going to have to owe a lot of bribes after this meeting.
Yeah. Where's that budget line?
I just want to, while we're, in the vein here, I just want to shout out to Deputy Chief Frost, because he's been in my experience with him, he's been fantastic and to work with, and really has brought a lot to the city too. So, great hire.
You're absolutely right. And the number one thing that I can do is recruit and retain qualified staff, and I'm really proud of him. And as we speak here tonight, he's currently with the Central Maine Apartment Owners Association doing a presentation on fire safety. That's literally where he is right now. So he's doing a great job. Everett's doing a great job, and the rest of the staff, the frontline staff, are really doing a bulk of the work. Thank you.
Please share the council's gratitude with your entire team. Please explicitly share our thanks
I will.
and praise.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Chief.
you.
So that is the last budget to review tonight. Just a reminder again that before the council meeting next Tuesday, starting at 6 o'clock, we'll have another workshop and we'll cover assessing, planning, finance, city clerk, and administration. And then next Thursday, there'll be another budget workshop at 6 o'clock, and we'll cover some more larger departments, public works, parks and rec, cemetery, and the library.
So each of those departments is in the manager, so that just so I can be prepared getting in there, that list that you just ran through, is that in the agenda?
I believe it is in the agenda.
It's on the special,
It's in, yes.
special schedule, the special schedule that he sent us for workshops.
Yep.
He did. Okay, good.
And I
just wanna be-
Not the agenda, but there was a
There's a-
schedule.
There's
There was
a
an
special
email.
schedule
Got you,
that we
got
had-
you.
that
All
we
right, I'll
received,
find it.
yes.
Thank you.
It was sent from Sarah.
Got you.
So it was from her. And a quick reminder too that we did share the electronic version of the full budget into the council's shared
Yeah.
space. So if you want to look at it electronically, it is there as well. So, and again, you know, my job is made very, very easy by all the department heads. I mean, you really have outstanding talent when it comes to your department heads. I couldn't do the things that I've been doing in this short time without them and without their support. And I know that they're supported by all of their staff underneath them as well. The battalion chiefs, the deputy chiefs, and the frontline employees. They're just fantastic.
Wow.
They really are.
We're gonna try to hire him a good city manager here.
I'm sure that you will.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone.